Satnam yogis and yoginis, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to talk about the self. The self. We talk about self. There is many terms that we use when we talk about the self. We talk about the real self or the false self. We talk about the higher self, the hidden self. I'm sure you've heard of many terms which talk about this elusive aspect. What is the self? In yoga, we talk a lot about self-knowledge or self-realization, but what does it mean? What is that? What is the self, and how can we know it? How can we realize it? And I think it all comes back to philosophy. If we look at all traditions in the world, when we think about philosophy, it's about answering one question: who am I? No, like the Greeks were saying, know thyself. But what self? Which self do I have to know? That's really the same in a way to what when the yogis say self-knowledge, know yourself. It's very much the same to when the Greeks talk about it or any other philosophy. Though there could be a difference in approach from the Western perspective and from the Eastern perspective. In the West, sometimes when we talk about this concept of knowing ourselves and questioning ourselves, who am I? It is a very intellectual approach. It's generally a thinking, a logical way of thinking, discarding things that don't seem rational to try to find some logic answer. And that's very much about the mind approaching the concept of who we are. So it's an intellectual approach, while in the East, I'm particularly thinking of yoga, obviously, when we philosophize about ourselves, it's more like an exploration and an experience. So philosophy in India is more taken as an experience. Who am I is an experience, is not a question that I need to intellectualize and answer from the mind, which already is going to give us a good idea of where we are going. But yeah, let's explore this self-knowledge and the different selves. So, who am I? Who am I? We are a human being. We are human beings, right? We are not human doings, human beings, which means that we should find something in ourselves that we relate to, that is a core aspect of our being, who we are, not the things that we do. So generally, when we are asking about who am I, it's a question of identity, but I tend to identify myself with the things that I do. If I am an engineer, or I am a teacher, or I am even a father, I'm taking care of my children, I see it like something that I am doing, and then I identify with that aspect. And that's not the self. That's something that I'm doing, that's an action. And the action may come from one self or another self, from the real or the hidden or the higher self. Where does the action come from? But the action itself is not who we are, even though we tend to identify with that. So we generally don't have a clear sense of self, of identity, of this true identity within. So we identify with the things that we do outside. And the thing is, the things that we do outside is, they change according to who we are with. Because we tend to put different masks, and we show ourselves in different ways. Excuse me. So we tend to have a particular personality with our friends and a different personality in our work and with our family. It is very common to see somebody speaking to their friends, and then suddenly they turn to their mom, or their mom calls, and suddenly they're speaking like 3 or 4 tones higher, which is more like a submissive behavior. And it's kind of like remembering that when you are a child, and children tend to have higher voices. So it's like we go into this higher voice mode, which kind of brings us this personality of being like a child within. So in front of different people, we put different masks and we show different personalities, but that's the persona, that's not the self. And so that's not, even though we identify with those things that we do, that's not who we truly are. So when we identify with these things that we do and with the different personalities that we have, that's a false sense of identity, a false sense of self. Or we could call it the false self. And by definition, that's what the ego is. Ego is it's a false identity. Yeah? The false identity, the false things that we identify with. That's what the ego is. So this is the first self that we encounter, the false self. The ego, it comes hand in hand with the mind. As the mind is maturing, developing as children, the ego is forming. Because we are learning, oh, these things I like, these things I don't like, and we start to create an idea of who we are through the things that we reject or accept in the world. This polarity starts with this polarity of I like, I don't like, I dislike, no? And from here on, we start to create layers of sub-personalities, and these are all layers from the ego. And by 3.5, already the ego is kind of half formed, and by age 7 is quite clearly formed. And then there is a cycle of 7 years. Every 7 years are some cycles, some things happen. Maybe some of the day we explore it in another video. It's very interesting. But somehow these first 7 years are very, very important, because that's during the time in which the ego and it's more established. The ego and these sub-personalities are more established. And so we create this false sense of identity, and we can separate that from the real identity, who we truly are. So let's start drawing. I like making lots of diagrams. It's not that, you know, by the end of this video we're gonna be totally fully realized in ourselves. But if we can understand better the relationship between the different selves, and I'm conscious that understanding may come from the mind, but the mind is the one that is causing the trouble. So if the mind can reach a point of understanding how the selves relate to each other, we may be more like, we may be able to prevent falling into our mind games, and we may be able to avoid allowing the hidden self to come up, which we will talk about, and we will be able to relate better to our real self. So let's do this drawing and try to find some understanding. So let's do I'm just going to do the higher part of the torso today. I don't need to go into the legs. And I already mentioned that there is one, let's put it brown. There is a false self. And I'm going to put it in the brain. But it's really more, well, first, it's not the mind, it's not the brain, it's the ego, yeah? But the ego lives in the brain, and it's linked to the brain. So I'm going to put here ego. The false sense of self. So when we see things in the world, we react in a particular way, and we put masks. Yeah, these are many layers. Yeah, there are many layers within the ego. Just like many sub-personalities. So this is the way we relate. And the real self is, if we go beyond all these layers and we are starting to remove layers, we realize that we are not our mind, we are not our brains, we are not our head, we are not our intellectual thoughts. And if we allow our consciousness to descend, we come to connect with, I will do it in green. How do I write this? I'm going to write self in capital letters, yeah? So this should be self in small letters, and this is self in capital letters. So this is our real self. And real self is a real identity, and a real identity in Kundalini Yoga, this is what we call the Satnam. So when we are chanting Satnam, when we are breathing Satnam, we are trying to bring our consciousness down into the real self, into the heart. I mentioned this is the, beyond all the layers of false identity, this is the core. And it's interesting, the word core, finding this core is like descending, yeah? And the core self, real self, yeah? This is like stripping out layers and finding the core. Which, very similar to core, which means heart, yeah, in French. So it's like going down into the heart. Okay, this is so far between the false self and the real self. We're gonna be expanding this much more. This diagram is gonna be much wider than this, but for the moment it's enough. It's important to have this clear difference between my subpersonalities and my mind and my structures, which is very much linked to my beliefs and my values and my ideas that were created through these first 7 years of age. But yeah, now for a moment, let's do a little break and let's take the word self itself. And if we explore the word self, let's put it in big. We have the S, the L, and the F. And if you've been watching other videos in my channel, you know that I'm a fan of sounds and the meaning of sounds. And why not exploring the sounds of particular words when we are using them so much? The word self itself, it's such a commonly used word but misunderstood as well. So why not go to the root sound of it and see what it's trying to convey to us? And I think it can be very revealing. So the S itself already, just the S, the S is a sound that is going to emphasize whatever comes afterwards. So if you have a word like mashing potatoes, smashing is going to make it stronger, right? And so the S is going to emphasize what comes afterward, but it's one of the most common words, letters at the beginning of words. And 25% of those words are in relationship to the snake, the serpent, which slithers, and I've done already a few videos on this, so I'm not going to go on, but let's just say that the S reminds us of the Kundalini, of the energy of the Kundalini. But it also connects to the concept of spirit and self and soul. So here we have the Kundalini, the soul, and the spirit. This is what the S is telling us about. Yeah, it's kind of telling us, come on, connect to this. Now the L sound. This is Margaret Magnus's book, God's in the Word. I use a lot to reflect on sounds. It says how the L is an amorphous mass which can be induced to move, but it doesn't force its way through. So it's something about movement, yeah? There is some kind of movement. And it talks a lot about how in the final position is like ale or whale or boil or spoil or toil. So it's like hardship. But this is not fully last position. There is an F afterwards, which we will see what the F means. But it's generally going in two directions. It's going to be weightless, going up into the love and the light, or like with weight, like a law. Yeah. So there is something going higher and something going lower. So the L is telling us, are you going to go up or are you going to go down? It's already telling us here, are you going to go up into your mind or are you going to go down into your heart? But it's going to be more complex when we add the other two selves that we haven't explored yet. So that's the L. But what about the F? I'm not even sure we covered the F sound when we were doing the Sanskrit alphabet, because the F is not really in the Sanskrit alphabet. So let's look at it here. Let's look at it in more detail because I haven't covered it in other videos. So it says that B lives before and during the explosion, like boom, bang, the body of the baby is born, yeah? F is what happens afterwards. So millions of tiny particles, like a fountain. It's puffy, it's bulging. The P is puffy, the B is bulging, but F is fluffy, frizzy, and fizzy. And I put also fuzzy. Because if it's millions of particles, it's something fused, right? That you don't really see, you cannot really perceive. And already, what this is pointing to, before even moving forward, is that this S, which tells us about the spirit, and the F, which talks about something diffused, is telling us that there is a diffused self. And I'm gonna draw it like a big cloud here. Just ignore that this is inside, yeah? This is what we call the higher self. When we talk something, does it come from your higher self? We are referring to this, which is a way to say the spirit. Higher self, we could say that is analogous to saying the spirit. And from other videos I mentioned, whenever we hear the word spirit, change it with consciousness, because very often we are talking about the same. So there's some kind of higher consciousness, higher spirit, or like I think American Indians would say that the great spirit. When they talk about the great spirit, they would be referring to this kind of universal cloud. Okay? The higher self is kind of part of the universal self, which would be God, yeah, and it's kind of mixed with it. And this is our spirit, and our spirit descends. You remember what I said about the L? You can go up or you can go down. So there is going to be something coming down and coming into ourselves. Let's pause for a moment. Let's continue with the F, and then we will explore it a bit more. So it takes wing to fly or fall freely on the wind, yeah? To go up or down again, very much like the L is telling us, are you going up, are you going down? Self. The L and the F are telling us this, going up or going down. It's also related to fate and to fun. Interesting about the fate, maybe this is something to reflect upon. But anyway, let's go back, let's go down. Where B is in the back, the F is in the front. So it moves forward and it stands at the frontier. It's very suggesting, because the frontier is going to relate to something that later I will talk about, which is the veil. I think I put it here. Yeah, veil, very small. So there is some veil, and the F of the self, the F is at the end of the word. So when you reach the end of the self, when you touch the deepest part of the self, then you're going to come that after the self there is I'm going to put it in pink. There is a veil. It's the frontier to the veil. That's an interesting way of seeing it. We will reflect more upon this in a moment. It also puts a face. Wasn't I just talking about the different faces that the false self puts? Yeah? So this is the different, how it shows itself, how you see it from the outside. Which more often than not is fake, false, and forged. Is a complete fraud. This is the false self. And again, the corresponding parrots of P concern posture more than form. And this is because it was saying that, I didn't read this part, but it's still talking about how P is concerned with position, but F is concerned with form. So it's talking about what kind of form does it take, yeah? So this may not be very relevant to us right now, but okay. P concerns with posture more than form, but in the face in F can also be fair. So it's saying that the face, more often than not, is fake, false, forged, and fraud, but it can also be fair, upfront, and frank. So this is the false, and this is the real. So the F is telling us there is a false one, there is a real one. Which one are you going to relate to? So that's why I explore sounds. I find it very revealing that the very sounds themselves, when you read them, is telling us something. Look, there is a spirit, yeah, there is a soul, there is a kundalini energy, there is a snake within us. One is high up, the soul is going to be here, hopefully, and there is a kundalini coming up from here. So there is S all around, there is a movement, yeah? L also employs a movement, and it's going to be a movement up or down. And F is also telling us it's up or down. Which phase are you going to take? Are you going to take the false self, or are you going to take the real self? Very revealing. And it also says, look, at the very end of the very deepest point of the F, there's a frontier to something else, something that is beyond. And there is a veil, because we cannot see what is beyond. We will talk about the veil in a moment. Already very interesting, yeah? So there is this higher spirit, this higher self, and it's more like a cloud, but this is like, a cloud is water, yeah? And when it rains, the water comes down and forms little drops. And as the water crystallizes, it becomes the soul. So this is what I think Jung called it the individualization of the spirit. Yeah, spirit individualized, yeah? Individualized. Sorry for my writing, but I hope you are listening to what I'm saying. I'm just writing it for the sake of completion to the diagram. But this is the spirit being individualized. And as the spirit comes down, it's dripping, 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 falling down. And if you are allowing yourself to bring your consciousness down into your heart, connecting to your Satnam, breathing consciously, what is crystallizing, this thing that is coming down, is crystallizing as soul. So this process of going down, this is what we call crystallization of the soul. So the path of yoga sometimes is mentioned like that. The path of yoga is the path to crystallize your soul. Sometimes they say crystallize yourself as well. It's basically the same. If you crystallize your soul, your higher self is coming into your real self. You are becoming your real self. And it's interesting, you don't go up for answers. You go inwards. When you are coming down into your heart and when you are contacting with the real self within, you are calling upon this higher self to come down. You are not going up. You're like letting the higher self come down. And then this higher self may bring an intuition of, how to approach whatever situation is coming, what to do next. So this is the approach, yeah? All right? So I hope so far is so good. I mean, if this was a course, I would ask, how are you doing? So far, so good. Did you get this? If you have some doubts or questions as these things as I'm mentioning, just pause the video and write it in the chat, and I will address them in the comments, or maybe if it's very relevant and I need to expand and do some other video, I can expand it. So just write down whatever is coming up for you. Are you finding some realizations with this? Are you realizing something? If not yourself, at least something. So that's, I'm interested to know where you are. It's interesting, and something else, as I was writing self, I always look at the meaning of words and words which are similar. And I thought, a shelf. A shelf is very similar. It's like something, you put something on somewhere, right? It's like that one over there, yeah? Something that you put something on top. So can we have the heart like a shelf? And can we rest on the heart and stay relaxed in that place. I felt like that image was helpful to me. And the thing is, as you come to rest in the shelf of the heart, something else happens. And this is the difficulty of why we don't go down from the head. Down, below the heart, there is something else. There is something deeper. This is our diaphragm, and below the diaphragm, there is a lot of things happening. And this is our emotions stirring. And emotions can be something nice and quiet and just like little waves on the horizon of the diaphragm. But they can also be terrible tsunamis. Because between these 0 and 7 years of age, something else was happening. Not only our false sense of identity was formed, but also what we call the karmic baby, or like a monster within appears. So there is another soup. It's not really like a personality, but it's like a part of us. This is what we call the hidden self, which is all the needs that were unfulfilled, all the traumas, all the incomplete aspects that left us unsatisfied within this 0 to 7 years old, all the trauma experience that we suffered or we felt, that becomes the hidden self. And the hidden self is like a baby. And this is not the kind of baby that in psychology sometimes is said you have to hug your inner baby. No. This baby you should not hug. This baby is to close on the key and shut it down. Don't let it come out. Because if you let it come out, it's never satisfied, and you can never compensate enough for whatever it feels that was how it was mistreated or how it suffered when it was a child. So when it comes up as an adult, it's very smelly. Yeah, very smelly. It's like tantrums, neurosis, and many mind manifestations like anger, but disproportionate reactions. You say something to somebody, and they bring this monster out, and you're like, what is this? Where is this coming from? Where was it lurking? So, well, it was lurking under the surface. It was lurking here, under this space. This is what we call the hidden self. And it's like a little demon. Yeah, and with a pitchfork. These are the emotions, yeah? Particularly anger. And it's an expert in trying to manipulate others. Yeah, it will use emotional bribery and emotional try to make you feel pity for them, or try to make you feel ashamed for what you did, or whatever, to try to manipulate you into doing what it wants. And that's very nasty when somebody allows that to come up. And so let me make sure one thing is clear. This is not the shadow, the shadow self, that could be another self, but we don't really call it self. Our shadow is part of ourselves. It's like our darkness. If there is a light, there is a darkness. We show ourselves to the world in a particular way, but there is also something that we hide, how we don't want people to see, something, what we do in our private life, in our bathrooms, in our bedrooms. We don't want people to see what's happening there. That's something hidden, that's something of mine. Also, my own needs and my own necessities are in the shadow. So very often we try to avoid the shadow, and we repress our needs, and we close them, and we think they are dirty or whatever. And that repression becomes corruption, corrupt, yeah? And then it stinks as well. So hidden self, the shadow is something that if we have a healthy connection to it, there is a lot of power in it. There is energy, there is power. But if we try to repress it, then it becomes corrupt. Now, the hidden self is not the shadow, but it lives in the shadow. It hides in the shadow. It's lurking under the surface, ready for when some particular necessity is not met, and you start to have an emotional reaction, and then the hidden self is ready to jump up and sabotage the whole discussion and the whole argument, and then you are fighting with somebody. So there is these different aspects within us. And so we can be relating to the outside from the false self. We may connect to the real self, connected to the higher self, or we may fall into the hidden self. If the thing is, because the hidden self is living here, hiding here, that's why when we go down, often emotions begin to stir. And if we haven't processed our emotions, if we haven't processed whatever happened to us in our past, that's going to come up, and it's going to sabotage the self, the real self, and then the monster comes out. So we need to process the past, close it down, close the hidden self, let it lock down there, but have a healthy connection to our shadow, healthy connection to our needs, and then allow ourselves to feel what's happening. The F is the sound of feeling. Yeah, the F is the words for feeling. So feel what's happening and feel ourselves here in the self. So this is the basic diagram for the four selves. There is something else that I wanted to mention as well. When we talked about the F being the veil, is like comes another aspect, which is, so what happens when we are capable of dealing with the hidden self? By the way, all this is studied in the level 2 conscious communication for Kundalini yoga training. I'm just this diagram is not studied in the level 2. I like to do this to understand better what's happening in the level 2 and to have a more clear relationship to the self. But if you want to expand on the idea of what is the hidden self and these other concepts, then that particular training is very good for this. But let's go on a little bit more then. Let's just complete this. So what is this veil and what is this frontier? If we are managing to go beyond the false identity, and we deconstruct all these layers, and we allow ourselves to feel and come down and crystallize our spirit, we have dealt with our hidden self. We are, hiding it there. It's blocked, and we have a healthy relationship to our shadow, and we can live in the heart. This is like self-knowledge. This would be self-knowledge or self-realization. This is when you come into the heart and you can live in the heart, in this self. When I say the heart, I mean the self. It's so close together, but it's like a sort of falling within yourself. Imagine this shelf that you are sitting on, yeah? Falling within yourself and just staying in this true aspect of who you are. And there is a true feeling of existing, of being, not doing, but being, and being here. However, and notice the word realization comes real. Real is the real self, yeah? It's very funny. However, this is not a liberation. This is not Jiva Mukta. Why is it not liberation? You can be in your real self and know where where the source of the thoughts are from. This is a concept Ramana Maharshi talks about. Ramana Maharshi. And if you have seen any videos from Muji, you will be very familiar with this aspect of go beyond the thoughts. Where are the thoughts coming from? And go beyond. It's kind of asking to connect with your consciousness, not with your thoughts. And as you are allowing yourself to go to the source, the core, you're going down into your sense of self. And then you feel that you exist. And many of the problems that come from the mind, the ego mind, they just dissipate and disappear. And the hidden self has no power there. So you are staying in the self. That is self-knowledge. That is realizing yourself. However, that's not full liberation yet, because when you are here, you are yourself, but you don't feel a connection to God automatically, not necessarily, because there is some, if you go deep within yourself, I'm going to do these little S's coming down. Yeah, there is this veil between ourselves and the great unknown. Let me see, should I take a light green? This is the you of unknown, the great unknown. We are contained with it, and it is within us. Yeah? But there is a veil between us and this great unknown. Unknown being God, yeah, the great God within. There is an inner veil through our heart. There is an outer veil as well. If you look at here, when we let our consciousness go high, and it can extend in front of us as well, because when we are looking through the third eye, it's like trying to pierce the veil to see what is beyond, because we are trying to see this great unknown. What do I mean by this? So, unknown means something I don't know. Yeah, there is the possibility of Buddha within, of Ardaas being a Buddha. Yeah, Christ consciousness. Yeah, Nanak's consciousness. But I don't know yet. I don't know that part of me yet. I haven't realized that. So that part of me is unknown. Let's say God within, the most divine possible Ardaas that can exist, my name, yeah? It's still unknown. So there is an unknown which is like godly, divine, and it's not known yet. So between the parts of me that I can know and that unknown, there is a veil. That divine aspect of myself, which is God within, God without, God within, that's a reflection of God without. So that unknown within is a reflection of unknown without. So this divine aspect within, which is very deep beyond the self going down, it's a reflection of the unknown without, the God outside. So as we are meditating, we are coming down into the self, as we are bringing our consciousness and our awareness to who we truly are, to our breathing and the truth of who we are finding self-knowledge, self-realization. If we go deeper within, then that veil comes in front of you. Now, when that veil comes, there is generally two approaches to it, the Shakti and the Bhakti. Shakti is like some people try to pierce the veil, right? To pierce it through their power of their own kriyas and meditations, their Shakti power, yeah, with their own meditation, like pierce through that veil and get to know God, yeah. And that's just one approach. The other approach is Bhakti, which is sitting in front of the veil and ask for the veil to be lifted. Yeah, it's softer and it's more respectful in some way. No, it's like asking for the blessing, because we can knock on heaven's door, but we cannot break it to come through. Right? It's like you come to the door, you touch, ring the bell, and knock on it, and wait for it to open. And if there is a grace, it will open and the veil will be lifted. And if not, you will be waiting. But at least you are by heaven's door, you're not in hell. So that's the Shakti and the Bhakti. And Bhakti would be more like prayer and devotion and mantra chanting. And Shakti is more like the kriyas and the meditations. So it's not that one is better than the other, because actually your kriyas and your meditations is going to give you the power to hold on by heaven's door. And if not breaking it, but at least, to stay there, it takes a lot of power. So the path is actually an ideal balance between Shakti and Bhakti. Not just one or the other, but finding the balance between the two. So this would be the idea. And the diagram is complete. Higher self, hidden self, real self, false self, the unknown without and the unknown within, the veil separating both, self-knowledge, self-realization, the spirit, crystallized as the soul. You will have seen in some of the videos that I put in this channel that I talk about how Kundalini has to raise. This is the raising and the coming up and coming down of the L and the F. Kundalini has to raise, has to mix with, Shakti with Shiva. And then we have to come down to the heart and settle in the heart. So there is going to be a movement like that. And then when we set into the heart, pray that someday may we be blessed for that veil to be lifted. And that is something that's enough for today. I hope it was enlightening in some way. And I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like it and share it with others. Write in the comments. This is all helpful to the channel. And until next time, Sanam.